Hey guys, Aaron Cohen, Real Security, coming at you from KFI AM 640. I got to tell you, this last church attack, man, really hit home. And it didn't matter whether it was a terrorist or, some crazy white boy. This next episode, I'm really going to dive into what your church can do to insulate itself, to protect itself. And this entire episode, we got about 40 minutes here of fresh content on how to create your own in-house security team. So check out this episode. This is free content. Just trying to bring you guys every piece of experience that I have over the last 21 years. I hope you enjoy the episode. Do me a favor, comment down below. Share the pod. Again, Aaron Cohen, Real Security, coming at you from KFI AM 640. We'll catch you on the next one.
Sometimes I grow so tired.
Aaron Cohen, Real Security, powered by KFI AM 640, episode 103. The first security and counterterrorist specific show dedicated to giving you as many takeaways as possible as it relates to our personal safety. And yes, I start with Led Zeppelin because we're rambling. That's what we do here, we ramble. But hopefully we get some good nuggets, some good takeaways. Texas church shooting, more than 24 parishioners killed when an armor-clad gunman opened fire inside a rural Texas church this past Sunday, killing more than 24 people in the largest mass shooting in that state's history. 26 people were killed during the shooting at First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. Tiny town. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said he told Today, the paper Today, this past Monday, that there was information surfacing about why the particular location was chosen. We've had more stuff continue bubbling. The massacre in the Sutherland's Springs, which is about 30 miles southeast of San Antonio, and I'll tell you why I'm setting this up, was the deadliest ever at any house of worship in the United States. In addition to the dead, at least 19 people were hospitalized, according to 3 area hospitals. The shooter, who was later found dead, according to officials, he was identified as David Patrick Kelly, 26, of a neighboring town called, I believe it's Comal County. Kelly was a former member of the U.S. Air Force, discharged for bad conduct in 2014. A spokeswoman for the Air Force actually confirmed that Kelly was court-martialed back in 2012 on charges. And again, I'm going to talk about why all this is important to kind of rehash. Two of the charges assaulting his spouse and their child. He was confined for a year, reduced in rank before being discharged. And according to the spokesman, the quote was extremely deranged when it comes to this particular guy. So federal officials said that the motive for the shooting was still unclear. And according to the sheriff's office that's investigating, his in-laws attended the church. And although they weren't there at the time, the in-laws were speaking with investigators. And here's what happened. Dressed in all black, wearing tactical gear and a ballistic vest. I hate it when they use these tactical terms. Like, big fucking deal. Okay. The guy ordered a fucking D-bag, fucking vest off some bullshit, Black Hawk website or whatever it was. Anyways, wearing gear, tactical gear. He first began firing outside the church around 11:20 in the morning. Local time. It's about 12:20 Eastern. Before he continued his shooting spree inside, the regional director with the Texas Department of Public Safety, that's what he said. He was apparently armed with a Ruger AR assault type rifle. And a lot of people being careful here with the term rifle. By the way, AR does not stand for assault rifle. It stands for Armalite. Armalite is a company that manufactures the AR and ended up selling the rights or getting the rights to be able to produce it en masse for the U.S. military. Doesn't fire fully automatic. It's no different than a hunting rifle, okay? And, this is going to create all kinds of gun debate. This is not a political show. Let me say it again. It's not a political show. And my goal here is to try and be the one guy that can bring everybody from both sides of the political spectrum into the only thing that I think really matters, which is your personal safety. So what can we glean from these attacks? How can we attract an audience to the show from both the right and from the left and from the middle, and try and bring everybody together here to make sense about this stuff in terms of how we can insulate ourselves and become even safer as a country in light of all of the craziness we're seeing in this country. So what I don't want to get into is gun debates. I don't want to get into mental health, although clearly this guy was a mental health case. Obviously, he was deranged, so mental health definitely has something to do with it. The weapon of choice. Here's where I come out. You're never taking fucking guns away from Americans. It's never going to happen. Okay? It's their unalienable right to be able to keep arms, have arms, all right, as written in our Constitution. You're never going to take guns away from Americans. But we can make sure that there's more training. We can make sure there's some better screening. We can make sure that information such as this guy's lunacy is being shared by the Air Force, especially when he's been fucking court-martialed. You know what I mean? Where the fuck was the information shared between the Air Force? Where was the breakdown between DOJ, who does our background checks, and this fuckhead, all right, who clearly was fucking mentally deranged? Where was the information share? That's a fucking red flag. That's a problem. And quite frankly, and where I was trained, let me just back this up a little bit. I am a 21-year security, counterterror, and intelligence veteran. I have been in this business for over 20 years. I've protected all kinds of fucking celebrities I couldn't give a shit about. At the end of the day, we've seen what's happening inside Hollywood. The whole fucking thing's imploding. Yet an Israeli intelligence company that was hired by Weinstein, who's now publicly coming out and apologizing, saying, we're sorry for representing Weinstein and using our assets to go after, what's her name? The actress who came out. What's her name? The one who accused Weinstein. My bad for not remembering. She was married to the crazy fucking black music metal death guy. Anyways, Rose McGowan. And so you got the Israeli security company that came out, just quick off the top, it came out, said, we're going to give all the profit back. You know what? Fuck you. Give them all the money back. Forget covering your nut. All right? And I just talked about this on Fox 11 News this past week with a good buddy of mine, Hal Eisner, who I've been doing TV with for 15 years. He called me up. I need a soundbite. Aaron, Israeli company, what do you think? Well, you know what, dude? You can pick and choose who you fucking work for. Now, Hollywood is clearly imploding right now. I'm saving that for a different episode. But the bottom line is, when you've got money, you've got power. When you've got power, you can hire really talented, dangerous people, okay? And I think now's a really important time for women, and I love that women are coming together right now to implode this whole fucking town, because women have been so hard on each other for so many years that finally women coming together. Let me tell you something. If my company was 40 employees deep, I would only hire women. Shit would get done. That is a fact. And by the way, and I've said this before, El Al, all of their bag screeners, FBI grade quality trained women. Okay? They can detect lies. And if you want to get shit done, hire women. They're fucking smarter than men, period. And they're better at reading lies. Back to this maniac, though, David Kelly. Okay? So this guy, apparently, even though he was demoted, spent a year in the brig, and was dishonorably discharged from the U.S. Air Force and reduced in rank for essentially committing a felony, that information wasn't shared with the Department of Justice. So here's what we would do in Israel. Who's in charge of making sure that information gets shared? Oh, it was you? Guess what? You're fucking fired. Let's go get the next guy in place and make sure that doesn't happen again. It's time to start firing people who fuck up. What happened to, firing people who fuck up? You lose your job and we hire someone who's more capable. It's time to start pointing fingers. Start treating this thing like a corporation. If you fuck up, you lose your job, okay? If you were responsible for making sure that the Department of Justice knew that this guy was a convicted felon while serving in the Air Force, and you didn't pass on the information, bye-bye, all right? What I want to do with this particular episode is what I do with all my episodes. What can we learn from this particular shooting? Well, here's where I'd like to dive into. What I'd like to spend the rest of this show discussing is church security. How can you protect your church? How do you keep the next David Kelly, maniac, mentally fucked up, armed to the tooth D-bag from smoking 20 people inside your church? That's what we're going to discuss today, right? And here's how we're going to do it. For the last 20 years, I've been asking myself, man, how do I get my services, my expertise, the things that I've learned while living in Israel, while serving in Israel's counter-terror unit, all right, while protecting corporate CEOs, special events. I've done hundreds of them. I've trained SWAT teams all over this country. How do I take all this stuff that I can only give to people who can afford it? How do I get that to everybody? This show is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to bust the Gary Vaynerchuk here. You got to give away free content. And that's what we're going to do here. And I'm going to give away as much free information as I can, because I don't think that anybody here in this country has any fucking clue what to do. And that's the only reason why I've been given the mic at this radio station, which is to give color and provide texture for the purposes of the listeners, you guys, being able to glean from the harsh lessons that I've learned and how badly I got my ass beaten in my training pipeline based on the 5 wars in Israel, which led to molding soldiers today, which led to El Al, our security apparatus, our airlines, our Mossad, which is one of the finest intelligence agencies in the world. You're never going to be able to go toe-to-toe with these guys. The reason why is because everything they do is psychological, and they're experts in using psychology against our enemies, including, we've got Jews from everywhere in the world. We've got Jews who speak Arabic. We've got Jews who speak French. We've got Jews with British accents. We've got Jews who speak Portuguese, Italian. We're everywhere, people. And we're going to, and let me just for the record, the Samsung phone that blew up last year, we've had that technology since 72. We've been blowing up motherfuckers' cell phones for a long time. Let me just get that straight. It's nothing new. Back to the topic. How do we protect churches? How do we, not every church can afford a security company. Look at the size of this church. This was a tiny little setup in Sutherland Springs, 30 miles southeast of San Antonio, 19 people hospitalized, all right? And, I don't know if a church this size can afford to hire security. Let me give you some numbers on security, okay? The average security company is probably going to charge somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 to $35 an hour for an armed guard. A little bit less for unarmed, a little bit more for armed. But the problem is you don't really get shit. Basically, what you get is a non-federalized version of the TSA. And they suck. TSA, $7-8 billion mall cop company, still checking breast milk, and I'm going to rip on them every episode. By the way, TSA just had a report that came out. They failed 50% of their weapons screenings that were conducted this year. And that's up from like last year. I mean, when are we going to disable this monster mall cop company that cost $8 billion? It's a fucking joke. All right. So basically for $20 or $25 an hour, you get a TSA, Paul Blart, mall cop, standing outside, overweight, very little training, probably not armed. And if the guy is armed and you pay another $10 an hour, now you're up to $30 or $35, it gets expensive. And if you do the math, you're looking at potentially $60 an hour for 2 guards. You want to have guards at entrances around your church. And this isn't just for churches, by the way. This could be synagogues. This could be, I'm going to say it. This could be for a mosque. Not all Muslims are terrorists. All right? We've seen mosques get attacked. And there's good Muslims out there. Okay? So once you start adding up the amount of money it costs to be able to stack your manpower, you got to ask yourself, how many entrances and exits do we have at the basic church? Well, you get the main doors leading into the church. You've probably got a side door. You've probably got a back door. There may be 3 entrances. You may have a parking lot. You may be looking 3, 4, 5, 6 guys just to cover all the points of what's called egress. All right? Again, we're going to lay all of this out. My goal right now is to teach you, if you're listening, how to build your own in-house security team for your parishioner, for your church, for your congregation. Jews, Muslims, doesn't matter. Okay? Christians, all the same. All right? Peaceful place of worship. And here's how we're going to do it. All right? So the fact is you're looking at 30 to 35 an hour per guard. Multiply that, and you're looking at your services on Sunday. How many hours is that? You're looking at least 4 hours to get them in there. Multiply that out times 4, 5, 6 people. You're looking at almost $200 an hour at 4 or 5 hours. You also want to get them there an hour early so that they can advance and scout, surveil the area, and make sure that there's nobody there. You could be looking at, $1,200, $1,500 and a tiny little, church outside of a major city. Multiply that out times 52 weeks. You could potentially be looking at another 50, 60, 70,000 a year for security. They can't afford it. So how do we do this economically? Well, not only can we do it economically, but there's a way to do it better because you're not relying on a third party anymore that has no vested interest in protecting your asset. And by your asset, I mean your congregation. All right? So here's where I would go with this. We have got, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of churches across this country, but we've got an estimated 300 million guns out there, whether you like it or not. And here's the truth, and everybody will agree with me no matter what your stance is on guns. For the most part, considering the fact that there's 300 million registered guns, the FBI data on the amount of actual murders that are committed with weapons does not reflect the amount of guns that are registered. All right? You don't see 300 million fucking people running around killing people. Most of the people that we know, everybody listening to this podcast knows somebody who owns a gun, and that person probably owns more than one firearm. And they would never do what this fucked up kid did, ever. Think about it. Ask yourself, who do I know that owns a gun, and would they do this? Chances are it's a no. And the reason why is because most Americans are civil. Most Americans have a pretty good concept of safety and are very paranoid around their guns. Even if they own them, they want to be careful with them. Now, they don't train enough with their guns, but I will tell you that for all of the people that we know, the majority of them, 99% of them, won't do anything fucked up with their guns. So you've got 300 million guns out there that are registered. How many vets do we have? Hundreds of thousands of vets right now, combat tested, proven. Okay, and there's no crazy PTSD fucking scars. It's a total misunderstanding. Most vets are really fucking great when they get out. And once they figure out what their next purpose is, the biggest problem with vets, and I've been a vet, is what's your purpose after serving the highest cause? What do you wear every day? What do you do? So we've got hundreds of thousands of highly trained vets with tons of combat experience, working in forward areas, ability to make decisions under very high degrees of stress, who are members of these hundreds of communities around the country. And if we're talking about the Bible Belt, we've got Virginia, we've got Texas, we've got the Carolinas, we've got Louisiana, we've got Florida. And people take their religion really seriously, and they should. But how can we get all of that security in place to cover all those churches? Thousands of them. You build your in-house security team. You look for the vets. You find that ones that are lawfully permitted to own their firearms, and you start deploying them in your church. And here's how it's going to look. To properly set one of these up, you're looking at it anywhere between 4 and 6 parishioners. And by that, I mean actual churchgoers who are between, the ages of, early 20s and, 40s, mid-40s, 50s, all good. All right, lawfully armed. In fact, you don't even need a concealed weapon permit to carry on the church property because it's privately held. It's privately owned. So we don't need any special permits, but the weapons need to be lawfully purchased and owned. And that's fair enough. Let's look at about 6 guys right now. How's this going to work? Here's where I'm going to start. You're looking at layers, people, when it comes to protecting this location. This is called static security. The key here is to layer it up. And what I don't want is to see 6 idiots standing in front of the church. That's not the way to do it. You're going to start with 1 to 2 parishioners. And if you can mark them wearing security jackets or a security t-shirt or a security cap, that's a start. What those 2 individuals are going to do is they're going to check bags. The reason why is because this gunman who opened fire had been to that church, if I'm not mistaken. So you might see people who you recognize. Everybody's bags need to be checked because you don't have a profile of every parishioner or every member of your congregation. You don't know what they're going through that week. You don't know what their criminal background is. You know nothing except, hey, hello. But you know what? You may not have enough data on each individual to not check everybody. And it doesn't have to be, we're not talking about taking off shoes and doing all that shit. I'm talking about sir, can you do me a favor? Can you open, ma'am, can you open the purse for me? And sir, could you do me a favor? Could you lift up your shirt for me? Or could you open your coat for me? There's no fucking way that this kid with an AR could have gotten into the actual sanctuary had he been checked. Now, I understand he opened fire before he got into the sanctuary, but there was no security outside. And because there was no security, he was able to fire at people and breach the sanctuary, or breach the main entrance, and then get into the sanctuary and continue to open fire. So what we need 1 to 2 volunteer security guys. I would say mark them. It acts as a deterrence. If you can have the word security on them, that essentially is going to say fuck off. Go somewhere else. That's one layer, and that's our deterrent layer. The second thing is the bag checks. Had there been bag checks at the Ariana Grande concert, had there been bag checks at any of the major terror attacks we've seen, the weapons could have been detected. And so the bag check literally inspects, and it's a 10-second process. Ma'am, could you open your purse for me? Thank you so much. Sir, could you open your jacket for me? That's layer number 2. Layer number 1 clearly marks security. Layer 2, we're looking for weapons. Layer number 3, we're going to take 2 more volunteers. And they are going to dress exactly as any of the parishioners would on that Sunday. They are going to be armed. They are going to seat themselves inside of the sanctuary. They are going to be responsible for the second layer, which is plainclothed, covert surveillance. Their job is to be the second ring, which now has to fail. Somebody gets through the security outside the main entrance and punch and penetrate their way into the main sanctuary where the congregants are inside worshiping. You now have 2 armed, plainclothed, highly motivated, hopefully intelligent, and well-trained armed responders. I recommend positioning them close to the main entrance of the sanctuary. It's no different than putting the air marshal as close as you can to the cockpit. Anybody who darts up that aisleway is getting taken down before he gets to that fucking door. It's the same thing. Get them inside, or have one inside and possibly have the second one outside, hanging around, covering the entrance to the second door with some type of visual contact with the first security crew who's doing the bag checks. All right? 2 plainclothed. Now, it's really important that those plainclothed armed volunteers, and I'm going to plug my one of my products right now, and the reason why was because I brought it over from Israel for a reason. Every off-duty police officer, security guard, or lawfully armed civilian in Israel is mandatory to carry a pocket carry folding cap that has extremely reflective panels that either say police, security, or armed civilian. It's mandatory to carry it. The reason why is because Israel taps into its off-duty police officers. We need them. They're the first responders. We don't have time for the lights and the sirens to show up in 3 to 4 minutes. It only takes 1 second to fire a round if you're a terrorist at a crowd of people. All right? And the mayor of Jerusalem talked about this last year. Israel leans on its armed civilians, but there's a caveat. The majority of Israel's armed civilians are former IDF or Israeli Defense Force, either combat soldiers or combat soldiers who were officers, which means they're highly intelligent and they're also incredibly responsible. Can you imagine if we had officers and combat vets here in this country, lawfully armed and given additional training to be able to respond to an active shooter? What an incredible layer that would be moving down the road when it comes to soft targets being attacked. Malls, schools, movie theaters, churches. Okay? So that pocket folding cap folds up, goes into your pocket. You can look at them on my website. Go to cherriesapparel.com. I manufacture them specific for U.S. law enforcement and for concealed carry here in the States. I'm the only company that makes them. I just sold several hundred units of the police cap to a major European national anti-terrorism unit, police unit, because they went, you know what? The Israelis fucking figured this thing out. We've got Charlie Hebdo, and we've got all kinds of fucking terrorism going down in the streets in Paris. We have to, and our highest trained guys are our national anti-terror unit. We got to get them running that Israeli pocket folding cap because they've got the training to be able to run with that pistol and fire in and around crowds. And I'll talk about that shortly. All right? So that pocket carry cap, and if it's not my pocket carry cap, get something fucking similar. Go to your seamstress and go get one made. It doesn't have to be mine. But you have to have some type of friendly fire avoidance clothing to be able to identify yourself to the police when they show up after the gunshots are heard. They're not going to know who the fuck you are as the armed responder in plain clothes, having shot the terrorist or the whack job active shooter. So you have to be able to identify yourself. When you do put together that piece of that cap or that piece of identification, bring it to your local police station and show it to them. The police love this stuff. They want you to be safe. They want to know that their communities are being proactive. And if there's police listening to this, they're writing this shit down, I promise you. Because even law enforcement in this country is 40 years behind we are in Israel, and it's no one's fault. We've just been dealing with it for so much fucking longer. Been dealing with this since 87, 88. All right, since the entire Judea and Samaria region went nuts and every Palestinian decided he was going to fucking blow themselves up in the middle of a fucking pizzeria in Israel, or Hezbollah was going to infiltrate through northern Lebanon and penetrate a school, which they did, killing and massacring kids. Okay? So we know the threat's real, whether it's active shooter or terrorism. You got to have that plain-clothed two-man team inside your sanctuary needs to have some type of identifiable clothing in the event that they break distance. The weapons are brandished. They fire at the threat. They drop the threat. That's firing in the center mass. If the threat is still capable of shooting, they dump a headshot into the guy. It's not personal. It's to keep his hands from moving. Okay, that's what we've learned with terrorism. If you go look on my website, there's a video under the cap link, or the Israeli police cap link. You will see a video of an off-duty Israeli police officer shooting a would-be suicide bomber in the head wearing an Israeli fold-up police cap. And the reason why was because he failed to detonate and then half dead was trying to hit the button. So I put that video up there to show how critical it is that our off-duty police officers are used as plain-clothed force multipliers. Churches, you can use your congregation to protect you. Get them plain-clothed. 2 guys outside checking bags, 2 more inside the sanctuary, plainclothed, armed. All right? Now, I'm going to add one more piece to that. If you're plainclothed and you're sitting inside, you better fucking go to the range and you better put up 40 targets and make them all good guys and take one target and make it a bad guy and stick it in the middle of the 40 good guys and spend the next 40 hours trying to shoot him. Because that's what that's going to look like. And if you don't do that, in Hebrew it's called Yeri Ben Amon. We're firing into a crowd or amongst many. 40 good guy targets, 1 bad guy target, mix it up, and then go find that, go play Where's Waldo on the range. Because that's what that's got to look like. And then you got to go get a couple dozen chairs because you might be firing from your seat. So your training has to mirror what the sanctuary tactical response is going to look like. Threat coming up you from the rear, attacking forward, opening and spraying. You may have to turn around to get him. You may be in your seat. He may run past you. You may not have time to stand. You may have 100 people jumping up at the same time. What the fuck is that going to look like? Run every conceivable scenario. Because if the training doesn't reflect it, you're a fucking liability. All right? And you have no right being armed inside of a sanctuary, especially plainclothed with women and children praying. Okay? So your training is critical. It's the most critical piece. And I've got close associates of mine who listen to my podcast, Green Berets, Dev Group guys, SEAL Team 6 guys I've known for years and have done cross-training with them over the last 20 years, who I'm very close with, who I respect, and they respect me. And they're all nodding their head right now because if you're not fucking trained, you're a liability. Get the fuck out of the way. But at the same time, if you can get the training, then you can build yourself a training program that models what that response is going to look like. And I mean realistically, then go for it. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the police can't protect us. They can't protect all of us all the time. And they know that. And most sane police chiefs will say, carry a gun, keep one in your home. All states allow for weapons to be kept in your home, except for the state of New York. And I believe maybe Hawaii. I'm not sure. But even California, which is, turned into fucking Russia, it's literally like a socialist country at this point. Even California, even though there's no CCWs or concealed carry permits given, everybody has the right to keep a firearm in their house. And there's a reason. So you can have the weapons lawfully. 2 guys outside checking bags. 2 women outside checking bags. Why does it have to be guys? Have the women out there checking bags. They can read the tells. They can tell if somebody's got some weird intention. Men are never going to be able to out-bullshit women. It's a fact. You want bullshit detectors? Put women outside checking those bags. Put them inside armed. Probably not going to jump up and volunteer as quickly to do the armed response. But you never know. You might get a couple of killers who jump up and say, hey, I'd love to do this. I train and I shoot. I put in 20 hours a month. Let her in. You know why? She's even less detectable. You have an armed woman inside there, sitting inside, who's got a Glock 17 or a 19, and she's put herself through a 40-hour training pipeline that models what the response inside the sanctuary would look like. She's fucking lethal. You know why? Because you never expect it. Because let me tell you something. When she jumps out of that seat, you're going to shit your pants. I'm shitting my pants just thinking about it. It's real. It's the real deal. Okay? I'd have a woman outside reading some behavior while checking the bags. You know what else? Women are better at asking people to do things. And people like dealing with women more. They're nicer. Men are assholes. We're a pain in the ass. Nobody likes dealing with men. You use this. It's no different than any other, what would you call it? Any other service business, hotels, restaurants. Women are just nicer to be around. They're generally more, they just have a better handle when it comes to customer service. So if you're going to ask people to open up purses, open up jackets, lift up T-shirts, hey, can you lift up your your ankles for me? Can I have a look, at the ankles, right? Lifting up the jean. I'm going to listen to a woman. I'm going to go, sure. Go have a look. Okay? And guess what? If the guy's got a weapon on him, he's going to open fire. So she can have a weapon on her. Her partner can have a weapon on him. The responders from inside the sanctuary can collapse on the front of the where the bag checks area, where they got 4 guns on one asshole. How far do you think he's going to get? And please understand, go direct to threat. Wherever the shooting is, don't try and get James Bond. What if there's a secondary breach inside the? It's not going to stop. No what ifs, could be's, and maybes. If you hear gunshots, run to the gunshots. Neutralize the threat. Shoot them. and then get the police on the phone. Okay? So co-ed bag checks outside. Co-ed plainclothes, if it's doable, inside the sanctuary. Friendly fire avoidance gear. Some kind of cap, some kind of hat, something you can put on your body, on your head, to identify yourself to law enforcement and to the other parishioners so that they know who you are. And here's the other thing. When you go into the services, don't break distance when you're plain clothed inside. Walk in like you're going to pray. Go listen to the services. Don't break distance. You need to keep that level of anonymity in order to have the element of surprise. It's called deception. It's a fucking tactic. That's 2 layers. That means the bag checks are going to have to fail. And if the guy does get through the bag check and he runs in and you don't detect a weapon, or you don't detect a weird behavior, he gets into the sanctuary. Now he's opening fire. You've got 2 armed volunteers inside ready to put him down or her down. Maybe it's a female terrorist. You never know. Okay? 2 layers now have to fail. I'm Aaron Cohen, Real Security, powered by KFI AM 640, coming right back at you.
Hey everyone, it's Billy Birdsell with Recoil TV. Enter the Cherry's Deep Concealment Holster. This is the first holster I've ever messed with that goes below the waistband. And what does this do? It accommodates a lot more body styles, different kinds of clothes, and a much bigger handgun, like a full-size Glock 17, where you would never be able to do this just in a traditional holster. As you guys can see, this Cherry's Deep Concealment Holster makes a Glock 17 with an RMR appendix inside the waistband pretty much disappear. What is also awesome about this is that sitting down is infinitely more comfortable, even with a full-size gun with an optic on it, way more comfortable than just a subcompact handgun in a regular holster. So there's definitely a benefit to it. It's an interesting capability, first time that I've run below the waistband, and it definitely has some huge benefits as in carrying a larger firearm, and it is much more comfortable, especially in a seated position. I'm Billy Birdsell, and we'll see you down the road.
Aaron Cohen, Real Security, powered by KFI AM 640. I'm back. I'm going to add a 3rd layer now. Why are we multi-layering this? Let me tell you why. The Israeli methodology is based on multi-layers. The reason why is because it would take a multi-failure event for a terrorist to reach a target. Every layer would have to fail. So the more layers or rings you create in between the people you're protecting and the terrorist, the more things have to go wrong. The more things have to get fucked up. The goal is never total security. You can't have total security. But what you can do is try and come as close as you can to it. So the goal is as close as we can get to total safety. Layer number 1, bag checks. Co-ed if we can. Let's get some women out there detecting, looking for lies, asking some, hey, how's it going? Can you open your back? And if something's weird, she'll know. How will she know? Because women are born to be able to non-verbally communicate with a baby who is hungry, who can't speak. Let's tap into that. We do it in Israel. Layer number 2, plain clothed, armed, volunteers. Layer number 3, you ready for it? 2 more volunteers in vehicles in front of your congregation on the street, at both ends of the street, wherever the stop sign is. It's called a choke point. Both of them are facing towards the congregation. So let me walk you through this, because this isn't a visual presentation right here. You got your congregation. You've got your main road that runs across it. Maybe it's a 2-lane street. When you drive far enough, you hit a stop sign or a light in one direction. When you drive far enough in the other direction, you hit a stop sign or a light. Both of your surveillance vehicles are positioned at the end of those streets. Position at the end of those streets. Put them on comms. All you need is some text messaging. Have them call each other up on a cell phone. Let the phone run. Go get a T-Mobile $50 cell phone. It's free minutes for $50. You can stay on as long as you want. Put your little headset in. And all they do is stay on the phone the entire time. By the way, this happens about an hour before people start to show up to services, and some people get there really early. We know the old folks like to get there early, right? They're an hour or 2 before everybody else. First layer that drops in, you got to put those surveillance cars in there. What they're looking for is they're establishing your sterile area. They're sterilizing the road. 9 times out of 10, a terrorist or an active shooter will do a little surveillance. He'll scale or check out his target. He'll want to know the best time to hit it. Same thing with crime, by the way. So you've got 2 vehicles facing each other at ends of the street, both ends of the street, creating a choke point. Here's how this works. They're creating what they call, in Hebrew, it's called a reshet chashmali, or an electric fence. Any car that drives into their perimeter, into their street, anything that looks suspicious, with the earpiece in, with your other buddy in the other car, call the vehicle out, write the plate number down. Now you've got some intel. You can see them casing the joint. You'll be able to see it. You may have to pull up a little bit closer. You got to adjust yourself so that you want line of sight on the actual building, and you want a decent, but as far as close as you can get to the choke point. So these 2 guys are basically monitoring every vehicle that drives in. How perfect is that? And guess what else they're monitoring? Bicycles, weirdos walking, bulging clothing, motorcycles with 2 people on it. Let's look at some of the profiles here. Some kid driving in alone. Who goes to services alone? Do people go to services alone? No. You go. When I go to synagogue during the high holidays, I go. When I have gone, once in 5 years, you go with family, you go with friends, right? You see a lone 20-something, white, Arab, anything, Jew, it doesn't matter. If he's alone, you're going to have a second look. You're also going to have a pretty good profile of what your parishioners are going to look like. You're going to know what they look like because you know who your regulars are. So you're looking for anomalies. So you drop those guys early. They get there an hour and a half before everybody else. Their cars are set up. Their cell phones have called into each other. They got an open line of communication, and they're calling out weird shit. First, they're establishing a baseline. Okay, this is what it looked like when we showed up. And now we're looking for anomalies, and anomalies are people who shouldn't be there. So any weird vehicle that pulls in, any bicycle that drives onto that street, you guys now have eyes in both directions on it. You can't beat that. And guess what? You can communicate that to the bag check guys. Send them a text. Say, hey, man, weird car just drove by, red Datsun, whatever. License plate, blah, blah, blah. Keep an eye out for it. Once you communicate that to or text that over to your bag check guys, they're going to see him drive by because you picked him up down the road. That's layer number 3. All right? What you're looking for is, we're calling that covert surveillance detection. You're looking for people who are scouting your location as a target. All right? The only weird people are you guys sitting in the car. That's the weirdness. You're alone in a car. So maybe work in a team. There's 2 more volunteers. You can have 2 in a car. Hanging out. Put some music on. Watch the streets. Layer number 3. In the vehicles. Okay? Really important, this next piece. Make sure you let your local law enforcement know what you are doing. Also, you may be required or mandated in your particular municipality or state to actually form a security company to be able to provide these protective services legally. You may have to get licensed to do it. Look it up. Make sure. Aaron Cohen, Real Security, powered by KFI AM 640, the only dedicated security and counterterrorist show. I'm back. In short, you now have an idea or a sense of how to protect your church, your synagogue, your religious group, your gathering. Everybody goes at some point during the year, okay? And again, this is the Israeli how-to protect your church on the cheap. Not everybody can afford to pay 70 to 150 to 300 grand a year for private security, which is probably going to be shitty anyways. You're going to get a lot more motivated people pulling them and recruiting them from inside of your parishioner or from inside of your group of worshipers who are going to actively want to protect that church. It makes sense. We have a mandatory army in Israel. Everybody wants to protect Israel. It's how we roll. So you've now got the Israeli approach on how to protect your church. Multi-layers, people. Bag checks outside. Co-ed, get the women on it. They can find the liars. Undercover, plainclothed, armed volunteers who have put themselves through a minimum of 40 hours of active shooter training that involves responding in and around crowded areas with lots of seats and covert surveillance detection vehicles positioned on your main street at choke points, looking at each other on an open phone call, calling out all suspicious vehicles, walkers, bicycles, motorcycles, and communicating that to your bag check team so there's no surprises. Awesome bringing this information out to you guys. You listen to it and you go, oh, that's all common sense. You're right, it is. Common sense when you've been dealing with this shit for 60 years. I'm Aaron Cohen. You're listening to Real Security, the first and only dedicated security and counterterror show in the country, powered by KFI AM 640. I'm out.